Hi, my name's Stephen Obriant.
Oh there, my name is Chen.
This is Tandayag.
And this is Daniel McDonald. And our topic of discussion is the Han Dynasty. The Great Han Dynasty ran for over 400 years, from 206 BC to 220 AD. It was the second imperial dynasty after the Chen Dynasty, and it was followed by the Three Kingdoms period. The Han Dynasty began with a peasant revolt against the Qin emperor. It was led by Liu Bang, son of a peasant family. Once the Qin emperor was killed, there was a war for 4 years between Liu Bang and his rival Xiang Yu. Liu Bang won the war and became emperor. He changed his name to Han Gaozu and established the Han Dynasty.
Han China often came into conflict with barbarian pastoral nomads to the north, particularly the Xiongnu, whose state or loose confederation, depending on who you ask, controlled the steppes of what will become Mongolia and Central Asia. The Great Wall, formed by connecting what remained of the old fortifications of the former warring states on the orders of the first emperor Qin Shi Huang, continued to be manned and repaired by the Han to keep the Xiongnu at bay. Universal military conscription remained from the warring states period in the early decades of the dynasty, but was later abolished once a more professional force was able to fill the much-needed cavalry role, supplanted the peasant conscripts. The Han were locked into a policy of appeasement, tribute, and political marriage for 60 years after a failed military campaign against the Xiongnu that resulted in a treaty that heavily favored their so-called barbarians. This was broken when the Chinese launched a series of massive cavalry campaigns against the Xiongnu, which will be known as the Han-Xiongnu War, conquering large areas of the northern and western frontiers, including much of modern Mongolia and Korea. A civil war undermined what was left of the Xiongnu's power and forced them to enter a tributary relationship with China, a reversal of the earlier diplomatic situation. This relationship ended with the internal Chinese upheaval that resulted in the short-lived Xin Dynasty, that divided the larger Han Dynasty into the West and East dynasties. The relationship between the Xiongnu and the Chinese remained fragmented and unstable throughout the eastern Han part of the dynasty, much like the Xiongnu themselves. Sima Qian was a historian who served as the court astrologer under Emperor Wu, the seventh emperor, and is considered the father of Chinese historiography for writing the Records of the Grand Historian, a general history covering the over 2,000-year span from the time of the mythical Yellow Emperor to the administration of Wu. For this, the later generations have referred to him as the Grand Historian. The Han Dynasty was contemporaneous with the late Roman Republic and early to Middle Roman Empire. Geographic limitations and the presence of powerful states in the territory between them, in particular Parthia, limited contact between the two empires to a few attempted diplomatic ventures and indirect trade on a newly opened Silk Road. The Roman aristocracy had demand for Chinese silk, so much so that concerns over the Roman currency being devalued arose multiple times. In turn, the Chinese aristocracy acquired from Rome items such as high-quality glass, perfumes, ivory, precious stones and metals, and asbestos cloth, among other things. What little the Chinese knew about Rome was apparently enough to make a good impression on them, to the point at which they referred to Rome as Da Qin, after the first imperial dynasty of Qin Shi Huang.
Now we will cover some of the scientific and technological accomplishments of the Han Dynasty. During this era, mathematicians were able to find a relatively close value of pi, theorizing that it was 3.15 rather than 3.14. They also provided one of the world's first proofs of the Pythagorean theorem. Another accomplishment of this era was the discovery of Gauss elimination, an advanced algebraic technique that is still taught in universities today. The mathematicians of this era also developed one of the world's first musical scales. Astronomers of the Han Dynasty, although still set in the ways of astrology, made relatively modern astronomical observations. They believed planetary bodies were spherical rather than flat. They also deciphered the reasoning behind solar and lunar eclipses and were able to accurately describe the water cycle. Doctors and physicians of the day began to realize the importance of a balanced diet and its ability to prevent many diseases. They also figured out the importance of exercise and calisthenics. Anesthetics were used in surgery and allowed doctors to help patients with little to no pain, an option previously unavailable. Acupuncture, a very popular treatment today, was starting to be used by the Han royalty and middle class, and was believed to cure common ailments and prolong life. Many medical strides were also made, including the diagnosis of stillborn patients. There were also several advances in Han-era warfare technology. The trebuchet, a common weapon later used in the Middle Ages, was used by the Han to siege cities. Trigger-activated crossbows were also very common and started to replace the traditional bow and arrow. Amazingly enough, as far back as the 5th century BCE, the Han employed the use of chemical weapons such as calcium oxide to disperse rebellions and prevent uprisings.
And now we're going to discuss an overview of Han Dynasty politics. The Han Dynasty was the second imperial dynasty of China. This period is divided into former Han, later Han, and Xin Dynasty. The capital of Western Han was Chang'an, and the capital of Eastern Han was Luoyang. The emperor was the center of government. He made laws and served as the commander-in-chief of the military and presided as the chief executive official in government. The empress dowager, or the emperor's mother, was a symbolic official in many respects that held the power to override the emperor's decisions. The cabinet of the government was divided into 9 ministries of household, guards, coachmen, justice, herald, imperial clan, finance, and steward. Local governments in descending order of size were province, commandery, country, and district. The emperors of the Han Dynasty enjoyed full control of the various districts of the kingdom. This can be seen through the central government's issue of standardized currency, which we'll talk about later. The role of the emperor. The emperor had absolute power. He headed the government administration, although ministers competed for influence in the emperor's court. The emperor appoints ministers to the government and has the power to modify laws. And now we move into economics. The Han Dynasty was characterized by population growth, increasing urbanization, unprecedented growth of industry and trade, and government experimentation with nationalization. The lower class suffered heavily. In particular, farmers fell deeply into debt. However, the government continually aided these lower groups. The wealthy and powerful groups were stripped of their power through heavy taxation. At one point during the Han Dynasty, the population topped 57 million people. This was taken during 2 AD. The currencies were issued by the government, and this pretty much consisted of coins. The Han Dynasty exhibited periods of nationalization and privatization of agricultural industries. Although this was largely experimental, it proved successful.
Well, if you're still awake, let's go into the super awesome random facts about the Han Dynasty. The Silk Road was established during the Han Dynasty. This trade route from China to Europe was a great source of wealth and luxury items, still in use today. Buddhism also first came to China during this time. And also, social statuses were very rigid. There were 20 ranks of status, and each level had increased privileges. Merchants were ranked very low, while craftsmen, doctors, and farmers were ranked fairly high. Time to rack your brain with some challenging questions. What is the name of the barbarian tribe that constantly hassled the Han Dynasty throughout their entire existence? Question number 2. Is the Empress Dowager the mother or the father of the emperor? Thank you so much for watching this presentation. Guli guli!